I really enjoyed the interview with Paul Russell. Wasn't it great to gain some insight into what it takes to become a Music Hall of Famer? Of course, we found out that Paul is so much more than a drummer in a band. Well, in several bands, actually. But what I mean is, there are so many more facets to Paul. He really has lived a life that is a story worth retelling. One of the things I really like about Paul is you wouldn't know what he's done unless you accidentally happen to strike up the right conversation and some of his stories slip out. He's such a nice guy, down to earth and unassuming. I really enjoyed listening to his story and the valuable insights and wisdom he shared with us. And I know there'll be many more chapters to come. On that note, this segment of the podcast is about wisdom worth sharing. At the end of every interview, I'll look back as part of the editing process and discover some of the gems that came out in the conversation and summarize them here. From Paul's interview, I've drawn out about 4 main areas. There were lots more, but the 4 that I've chosen are having a positive mindset, facing your fears, living a values-based life, and finally, being in the moment. Early in the interview, Paul talked about learning to surf at a relatively old age, for surfing that is, 19 or 20 he was. And this is something he's still enjoying today, but his reason for learning to surf was about facing his fears. And the way he chose to conquer his fear of both waves and sharks was to do something that would require him to become more than comfortable with both, surfing. When I asked why wouldn't he just avoid a sport that required more of him than any other to be exposed to sharks and waves, his response was that he saw it as a challenge, to be out of his element and to be at the mercy of the elements, and harnessing those to create a moment. Paul described looking ahead and visualizing what it would be like on the other side if he achieved this, gaining the composure to overcome the challenge. This seemed to be a theme in Paul's life. There's a label for this: equanimity, being calm and composed in difficult situations. Gaining composure and looking ahead to what might be on the other side has helped Paul deal with many scenarios that may have otherwise caused him to go off course. From performing in front of a small crowd, a smaller number than the band members on stage in the very early days, to very large crowds as a member of Supergroove, through to coping with things not going quite so well overseas and going for roles like he did in Stomp. Remaining equanimous has served Paul well, and I think there is a lesson there for all of us too. What was abundantly clear in the story of Paul's life's work was that he lives by his values, and this was no more evident in his decision to leave Supergroove. It would be a difficult decision for anyone, but at the age of 19 and without his parents around at that time, Paul had to make this difficult decision by himself. Yes, he sought the input of 1 or 2 others he felt he could talk to, but essentially it came down to his values, and at that time, if he'd have stayed with the band, he would have been going against his values. I can't overstate how amazing I think this story is, and how much I admire Paul for sticking to his guns, as he called it. That would be a massive decision for anyone, and his ability to, again, remain composed and deal with what's in front of him whilst thinking about how he would feel in the future if he didn't continue to live by his values is remarkable. It speaks to the character of Paul. Now, what was also interesting is that he was happy to state that his values changed over time, and that if he happened to make that decision now, it might have been a different decision. I think this is important. Our values are something we should live to, but not be a slave to. As we grow older and wiser and things change, we change too. Our values should serve us, enable us to be the best that we can be in any given moment, as Paul said. However, we shouldn't feel that once we have values in place and we've made decisions based on these values, that that's it, we're stuck with them. Again, I think this demonstrates Paul's ability to understand how things work. One final piece of wisdom that came from Paul's interview, and this was something Paul had recognized he needed to work on, was the ability to live in the moment and to do so more. What was interesting for me was that there's a dichotomy between Paul being able to visualize the future in order to get through a challenge, tempered with the need to spend more time in the now. And both are necessary. They've been necessary for Paul. He faced his fears and his challenges, and at the same time needed to be in the moment to be, as he stated, at his best self in that space, whether that was creating music or creating a moment in amongst the elements while surfing. I wonder if there's a connection between this and his current band's name, Midwave Breaks. After giving this some thought, what I took from this is the need to create good balance between being in the here and now, enjoying what's happening, being present, with the ability to look ahead and see where we're going and to imagine what it might be like on the other side. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Paul's story as much as I did, and hopefully you've been able to take something away that maybe you can apply in some aspect to your life, work, and legacy. Use it. Don't sit on it. Share it with others. Sharing is like teaching. It helps it cement things in our mind and helps us to commit to change, which is always required if we want to enhance our life's work. I wish you well for the future. I hope you are happy, safe, and successful in all that you do. And remember, live a life that is a story worth retelling. I'm Steve Worsley, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Life's Work, the podcast all about wisdom worth sharing.